Let's bring in Army veteran and Florida Congressman Cory Mills, who joins us now this morning. Thanks for joining us. So, Trey just laid out that the next couple of days are going to be pretty crucial. What's your overall view of things, and what are you looking for in the next couple of days?
Well, again, I think that when Israel started this campaign, it was to go after people like Hossein Salami of the IRGC's commander-in-chief. It was to look at people like Al-Abbasi, who led the was director of the nuclear program, as well as people like Ali Hajizadeh, who was in charge of their missile defense program. All three were eliminated in successful strikes. I think what you're seeing now is a little bit of a shift from strategic targets and just nuclear capabilities to infrastructure. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a targeting of Kharg Island. Kharg Island is the primary export place of Iran's oil. This would completely cripple their capabilities to be able to export oil. I wouldn't be surprised to see an additional targeting of the IRGC's leadership, as well as for, obviously, a continuation of military installation targets. I think that where this went from a limited strike that could have brought Iran to the negotiation table, where America could have been a mediator and arbitrator and agreeing to not have any of the nuclear weapon armament capabilities and complying with IAEA, has now turned into a full-blown war as a result of the retaliatory manner where the aggressor has always been Iran from the beginning. And so I see this is going to be ramping up quite a bit until one of the actual sides called Hamas, and my bet would be the Iranian regime.
Congressman, you're in Congress right now. The reaction from your colleagues on the other side of the aisle in the first salvo of strikes from Israel was almost to the sense of condemning President Trump, I guess, for failing in diplomacy to the point that Israel had to make this happen. If you flip the switch and look over to Ukraine, it seems those same people would be all about supporting Ukraine. To the American people sitting at home that aren't in the nuance of all this, it feels like one party supports war on one place and another party supports war in the other place. Can you help explain that and help people understand how either, supporting Israel is or isn't a partisan issue? Where's the politics behind all of this?
Well, again, the Democrats want to talk about how we should file war in one nation but not support our greatest ally in the Middle East, which is Israel, while the Republican Party and President Trump has continued to say that we're not for trying to launch warfare, want war in any of the countries. President Trump has been very clear that he's tried to find peaceful negotiations between Ukraine and Russia. He's continued to try and bring the Iranian regime to the table to have diplomatic discussions. So the only side that's been consistent has been the Republican Party and President Trump, who said, we don't want war, we want peace, but we will not allow a nuclear-armed Iran. We will not allow for continual genocidal, tyrannical dictatorship rule. And the Iranian people want a regime change. And so I think that what we're seeing right now is you're going to see defectors out of the IRGC as Israel continues to be successful in their targets. And those defectors are going to join, I think, a younger revolution. I think that we could see a regime change sooner than we think, which could lead to a free, democratically elected Iran, the same way we see with a free Syria away from the Assad regime, which has just fallen not long ago.
Yeah, I want to ask you about the other actors in the region. We just talked with Trey Yanks, who kind of broke down that strike that Israel had on the oil field that's co-owned by Iran, but also on the by
Qatar.
By Qatar. And he also mentioned that there were American interests, financial interests in that. So my question is, all these other players, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, all of these people have an interest in no war, because that's not good for business and that's not good for peace in the region. Where are they at in all of this, and how is the Trump administration managing their interests in the region?
Well, again, it's one of those things where you're right. You see all the economic and trade partnerships that have been developed within Iran and in the region. And I know that there's an Arab coalition that has come together. I know that Qatar, the UAE, Jordan, as well as for Saudi Arabia have come together to discuss the malign activities of Tehran, as well as for trying to look at what the solutions may be. They've been extremely focused on trying to help with the rebuilding of infrastructure and development with the new transitional government in Syria. And I don't think that they foresaw how quickly this was going to ramp up. So I do see Saudi Arabia and others helping in their own way, whether it's to help to clear airspace or whether it's actually to help with refueling capabilities, eliminating further surface-to-air missile capabilities, or what Jordan, the U.S., and others are doing, which is to knock down ballistic missiles that are being targeted at Israel. So there is a group and a coalition support for Israel. I just don't think that we're going to see that from a ground operational perspective.
So, you lay out a pretty terrifying situation where, the idea that we are sort of escalating, we're seeing an escalation past just that first strike where they're going beyond going after the nuclear facilities and trying to actually cripple Iran economically. So I guess my question is, is it possible that we might actually see Israel destroy the nuclear sites, or is that not actually possible? Are those nuclear facilities so well guarded, so deeply buried under the ground that they're not going to be gotten with conventional warheads?
Well, I mean, again, you saw where only months ago, a lot of the S-300s, a lot of the surface-to-air missile capabilities that was in Tehran had been moved to Qom, Esfahan, and Natanz. Those are the three primary nuclear facilities there in Iran. Israel actually had a couple of very successful strikes on Natanz. When they talk about how this is going better than they anticipated, I think what you saw is that Iran's military was a bit of a paper tiger. They continued to try and say and bolster what they had, but in fact, what's going on is that their surface-to-air capabilities and their ballistic missile capabilities has not been what they originally led it to be. And so I think that you could see a further escalation in Qom and Esfahan as far as nuclear facilities there. Natanz obviously has the largest number of centrifuges, which is an underground facility that could be done with a JDAM or some type of a dual penetrator. You could look at even a MOAB type that would be dropped upon it. But I think that we also have to be concerned with radiation leaks and also the further impacts that this could have. So we have to be smart in looking at what the strategic targets are, what infrastructure we can actually target without causing civilian collateral loss, but what would lead to either the regime coming to the negotiation table or ultimately calling no mas.
Congressman, you talk about JDAMs, MOABs. Obviously, I understand that terminology. But basically, for the common people, it's things that are like bunker busters, ordnance that can penetrate into the ground and get to something that's deeply fortified. The news headlines were that Israel may not or probably doesn't have that in their arsenal right now today. So for them to do that, obviously, we're talking about the United States either arming Israel or being a part of the offensive operation. If the United States gives capabilities to Israel at this point they don't currently have, is that considered an escalation? Do you think that that changes how other countries view what the U.S.'s involvement is?
Well, I think that Israel does have certain capabilities to be able to do this, even if it's just overwhelming fire to continue to soften the targets or to kind of disrupt what the centrifuge's capabilities are. I personally believe in Israel's right to defense, Israel's right to a free and individual state. I do look at as the Iranian regime as the aggressor here. They have been as they continue to try and ramp up their nuclear enrichment programs, which would be an existential threat to the region and to Israel. But I don't want to see American boots on the ground or continue American taxpayers' funding continue to fund wars that I hope that we can find a peaceful resolution to. Look, it's true when diplomacy fails, warfare starts, but we can also look at other solutions along the way, and that's maximum support against various ways to help with a revolution with the inside. It's a very way to look at what the Iranian revolt and the actual opposition would look like to try and go ahead and try and grab some of these military installations and defectors. You know, my whole thing is that I'm hoping Iran's going to come to a calmer head, realizing they can't win this war, and try and get to the table before this becomes even worse.
But so can I just ask you about this? I've been really fascinated by this idea of the Iranian dissent. There's no question that inside of Iran and those who have left the country, there has been horrible things that have happened to this population. The young people in particular have been, repressed, thrown into jail over TikTok videos, women harassed and tortured over not wearing hijabs. This is a horrible regime. There's no question about that, and that the people are unhappy. However, if you take out the nuclear, and if you take out their nuclear capabilities, and they've invested a lot of money into it, the Iranian regime has, they look so weak. So it's existential for them. So then what happens? They take out Israel takes out the nuclear capabilities. The regime looks weak. What kind of intelligence do you have that the people with that out can actually take over their own country?
Well, you're exactly right, Rachel. And look, I want to make the clear distinction. The Iranian people are not the Iranian regime.
Exactly. Right.
The Iranian people want a free and lifted democracy there. They want to have inclusivity and plurality. You mentioned women who are being killed, like Mahsa Amini, who refused to wear a hijab and was tortured and murdered. That's why we passed last Congress in the 118th, the Mahsa Amini Act, targeting the individuals for sanctioning. So you're right. There needs to be an uprising. There needs to be a continuation. I look to Reza Pahlavi to try and go ahead and continue to try and rally people. As you know, he is the son of the Shah. He's been displaced here in the United States for a long time. But I think that what we're going to see here is a true economic turmoil of Iran. We're going to watch where the rial is going to jump more than $1 million plus rial to the dollar. You're going to look at where energy terminals that are hit is going to have a drastic impact and slow down the exportation. But look, I put this escalation on the previous regime, the previous administration. The previous administration is the one that allowed the oil exportation in the tens of billions, that allowed to fund a lot of these nuclear programs. It was Joe Biden who actually delisted the Houthis, who allowed this militia group to continue to get stronger. It was Joe Biden who released and unfroze $10 billion in fungible assets so that the Iranians continue to try and get stronger and bolster their position. So I look at the last administration for the reason that we're at the point that we're at now.
Yeah, well, let's hope it's truly organic. We've never been very good at regime change that's CIA directed. So let's, it'll be interesting to see what unfolds. But
Very true.
I do appreciate.
And that's why it needs to be led by an Iranian people.
And CIA was part of the original Iranian regime
That's right.
problem. So, yeah.
Congressman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Congressman.
That's right.